Well, hello, everybody. Welcome to our panel, Native Americans in Extended Reality. I'm Kilma Latin, founder and CEO of Our Worlds, and I'll be the moderator. A little bit of housekeeping. If the audience has questions, please pull out your EDU app, go to session and engage, and that'll allow us to see your questions here, and we'll try to make some time at the end to answer any questions that people might have. This panel is going to focus on 21st century Native Americans and how our approach to world building is empowering members of the most underrepresented people in STEM while future-proofing cultural heritage. At Our Worlds, we're redefining the metaverse model by taking an inclusive and communal approach to world building. So just what can Native American wisdom and the knowledge systems teach us about world building? And it's more than you might think. Before we get started, I'd like to ask Dr. Stanley Rodriguez to open us in prayer.
Nyaites yeachan. Maichan a pau. Pili peña ma kamich peyi. Peña huamash eskuya nibmat. Sepu king ya cha matau maat. Sepu king mayum ya wait wiyu peyi. Nyo oyao mapa. Oyao war. Nyo pum mayum na som. Nyo wait. Wampu nya wipe nyopoma hankanam. What I said was creator of all. We have all come here to this place at this time. We have many different faiths, many beliefs. But we all come into this place to learn and to teach. We ask the Creator to bless us in our minds, in our hearts, in our bodies. Bless us as we continue to grow and gain knowledge. And when we are complete, that we have a safe trip home. And when we see each other, we see each other in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. At Our Worlds, the mission statement is to harvest the power of emerging technologies in order to more comprehensively capture, preserve, and share stories and culture. Our vision statement is that every square mile has a story, and we want to tell it. Imagine education and entertainment unfolding around you wherever you go. The idea that as you move through your day, you're also moving through content relevant to the place where you are. The Our Worlds company gives you that software in order to connect and unlock content, bringing a much more profound meaning to your location through immersive technologies. We're invoking an Indigenous belief system that education happens in nature. The byproduct of our work is that we're helping Americans arrive at a more true understanding about Native Americans while helping Native Americans arrive at a better place in America. Today, we're going to explore the confluence of emerging technologies and Native Americans. Our panelists are leading the way for Native Americans in the 21st century. The man on my right, Dr. Stanley Rodriguez, holds a PhD. He's a community elder and an elected tribal leader. He's a naval veteran with 2 master's degrees. He's a professor and a director at the Kumeyaay Community College. His cultural leadership is continuing to inspire multiple generations of Native Americans in the Kumeyaay territory in the Southwest. We also think he might hold a world record for the speed of Thule boat building. We don't know. But please welcome the Honorable Dr. Stan Rodriguez.
Yeah, thank you.
At 28 years old, she was elected as the vice chairwoman of her tribe. Eventually, she went on to become the chairwoman or the chief for a short time. She served in various leadership capacities for almost 2 decades, proving that her tribe, the San Isabel tribe, has long broken the glass ceiling of female leadership. She served with the Intertribal Court of Southern California and the Warner School Board. And she and her son Hunter traveled the Southwest to participate in traditional tribal gatherings and Peone playing, singing bird songs. She's also the survivor of a heart transplant and is a very strong advocate for women's health. the Honorable Brandie Taylor. And finally, a proud member of the Palma Band of Luiseño Indians. He has the kind of drive that you find in people who change the world. Halfway through an intensive public health medical doctor PhD program at the University of California, San Diego, he somehow found time to lead a National Association of the American Medical Students, designing new medical school pathways for Indigenous students, and has been published in world-renowned journals on matter involving health, equity, and COVID-19. In 2022, he caught the attention of the White House and was invited to participate in their Leader Summit in Health Equity Roundtable Series. He does this work not for himself, but for all Native American communities. That speaks to who we are as Indigenous Americans. And soon to be medical doctor, PhD doctor, Dr. Alec Calc, MD.
Thank you, Kilma.
Absolutely. So the format today is that I have some discussion points that are going to be fair game for all of the panelists. And then I'm going to ask some specific questions of each of the panelists. And with the time remaining, we're going to open it up to the audience and invite any questions that people might have. Panelists, you remember the rules from Comic-Con. Every panelist for themselves. Teasing. So the answers are going to have time limits. And if a panelist says something that you disagree with, don't be afraid to disagree. We're all adults here having a conversation. Conversely, if a panelist says something that you agree with and you have something to add, please add. So, discussion point number 1. Honoring our past, but looking square into the future. Are Native Americans moving forward as a civilization in the 21st century, or are we stuck reliving the same old stereotypes of the past? Dr. Stan Rodriguez, would you like to take that one first?
Sure.
2 minutes.
I'll be fast. Our people are at a crossroads. When we talk about our past, many times they view us as Native Americans in the past tense. We are people of the past, the present, and the future. When we talk about our own native organic science or our own native epistemology, it has been discounted in the past. We have been marginalized as a people. Western society has had this view of hegemony over our people. And now they're finding that our sciences do make sense. We've been here since time immemorial. And our fire science, our ocean science, all these are being seen again, that they have applicability. So I just wanted to share, and I can talk for days on this, but I know I only have 2 minutes, so I'll stop at that.
Brandie, would you like to expound on Dr. Rodriguez's work?
Yeah, I absolutely agree with Stanley. Definitely. Actually, not many of our history is even taught in school, but the fact that we are still here and, going to conferences around the United States and even today meeting people that don't even know that we have like over 500 tribes in the United States and there's over 100 in California alone. We have different creation stories, different languages, different beliefs, different songs, different ceremonies, but we are still here and our children are learning right now. Our children are bringing so much emotion and power back to our traditions. So we're definitely here. I want people to know that.
Wonderful. Alec?
I love always having a figure or a number to really describe the modern experience for Native Americans in the 21st century. And when I was going through K through 12 in 4th grade, students in California are asked to create replicas of Spanish missions, which has a very troubled history for California Indian people. And I was told to create a replica of the same mission that enslaved my people at a time where life expectancy for Native Americans was no longer than the age of 10. And I was told this was a great place. The Spanish history was romanticized. And I think there's a lot of power in who controls our narratives. And we have to spend a lot of time today reclaiming those narratives and the power of where we come from. Because for too long, we've been told who we are because that's been taken from us. And we're trying to take that back now. And that's the power that's inherent within all of us.
So a follow-up question to that, and then we'll work our way back this way. Where do you see Native Americans going in the next century? Just a couple minutes.
Sure. I think when we think about Native Americans in the U.S., Indigenous Americans, American Indians, Alaska Natives, there's a lot of stereotypes that are ascribed to what a Native American is or who they are. We think about casinos, we think about addiction, poverty, all these negative things. People would rather see a people that are dying rather than living, resisting, thriving. And if you're familiar with one tribe, you're only familiar with one tribe. And we're more than Native Americans. We're teachers, educators, physicians, lawyers. But for so many communities today, we're having so many firsts. I will be the first person from my tribe to earn a PhD. My father was the first to become a medical doctor. But before we had terms for doctor, for educators, we had our own terms for that. We've always been healers and scientists. So we're really reconnecting with the past to advance ourselves in the future.
I think you make a good point. In the 21st century, Native Americans have gone on now where we have the first Native American cabinet member who's the Department of Interior secretary. I know that there's Native Americans working at the State Department, Department of Homeland Security, CIA, all across all avenues of American civilization. Native Americans are in the midst of a bit of a renaissance, and that's kind of the point here of this panel, is to expound on these ideas that Native American wisdom and culture is more relevant now than you may think, especially in the evolution of the metaverse, because some of the models that are being proposed with the metaverse are very non-inclusive, very top-down, and some would say digital colonialism. If there's some Native Americans who still don't have access to the internet, then are Native Americans going to be the last to arrive in the metaverse? And if so, are they going to be stuck way off on some place that everybody else doesn't want to be? And haven't we been through that? This is relevant now, and this concept that, when people are choosing sides, how are we going to build the future of extended reality? Are we going to do it in nature with place-based, or are we going to do it in the metaverse, in this dystopian model where you're sitting at home and you're just, stuck in the house all day? Anyways, so what about you, Brandie? Where do you see our civilization going in the 21st century?
Well, I believe now our youth actually have so many opportunities that I know that I didn't have when I was growing up, of going to school, going universities, graduating, coming back and helping the community, going off to the military. That's always honored in our tribe. Our San Isabel tribe has several, probably like the largest, I think, veteran population in Southern California, and we always honor them. Just opportunities are there, and I believe that our youth now, if they take our culture with them when they leave the reservation or they go to these institutions, I think that will make them whole. I think a lot of it is it gives them strength, it gives them power, and it gives them courage. So I totally believe in our youth and the opportunities that they have now.
Wonderful. Dr. Rodriguez, where do you see our civilization going in the next century?
Thank you. One of the things we talk about where our civilization is going, where our people are going, we have to take a look at the past, what has happened to us, and the losses that have taken place. Where language, culture were outlawed, religion was outlawed, and since then, many of those things have been repealed. However, the damage has been done. So as we move into the future, it is important that we do not forget our past. Right now, with Kumeyaay people, of the 4,623 Kumeyaay who reside on both sides of the border, there's approximately 31 who still speak the language. Efforts are being made to reverse language shift. Also, education has been an issue, but a balanced education. We have people who do many different things. I'm going to throw Kilma under the bus right now, because this man is an accomplished helicopter and fixed-wing pilot. Graduated from Harvard, from the Paula Reservation. Going to UCSD, college graduate, all over. In other words, what I'm saying is being able to not just compete in academia, but also grounded culturally is important for our people, because that grounding helps our people to move on, helps our people to grow as a people. You know, we already know that when we lose our culture, we're dying inside. What is it that we need to do to change that? And I see, just like what Brandie said, the younger people are now stepping forward and saying, we see what's going on. We want to learn. We want to do these things, and picking up those responsibilities. And more healing needs to continue, but it is happening.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. A quick correction. I completed the executive education at the Harvard Business School for finance and strategy. My MBA came from the University of Southern California, but it was a back-to-back program, so thank you. Okay. Keyword, activation. So let's talk about merging culture with emerging technologies. My vision, our vision at Our Worlds, Catherine Ng, our educational advisor, Christina Steiner, and 3 contributors here. We're merging technologies with culture. And what does that look like? So we're using artificial intelligence for language revitalization. We are using extended reality productions to recreate historical events, military history. We're using volumetric point cloud videos. We're using VR, AR. We're using a full suite of emerging immersive technologies, and we're applying it to culture. And what we're finding at the Our Worlds company is that it's a best use case for immersive realities, because you're bringing much needed meaning to these immersive technologies. It's providing much more profound impact for people in education, retention, all these sorts of things. So again, we were having trouble. So if you look at the screen, you know, again, this is what we've been faced with in the last century, is these two-dimensional portrayals. But with immersive realities and immersive technologies, we can comprehensively capture culture in a way that wasn't working before. So when we would work with televisions or radios, you know, that's one-dimensional, two-dimensional. Well, now we're able to fully immerse people so that we can portray our culture in a very modern way and in a way that continues to evolve, and we're able to comprehensively capture things like Thule boats and language and immersive and interactive. And so it's really profound, some of the confluence that's happening between these new technologies and the oldest civilization in the United States. So, speaking of Native American culture, is our culture defined by our history, or is Native American culture allowed to evolve? Is it okay to evolve culture? Dr. Stan Rodriguez.
Culture is not static. We constantly evolve. However, I want to throw a caveat in there. It is important not to forget who we are and our own native epistemology. When we talk about our organic science or organic knowledge, being able to teach that, being able to show how to do these things as we continue to grow, I think it is very important. Our stories, our songs, they speak to a time from before. And I remember one of our traditional singers, and in our songs, each song tells a story, and there's hundreds of songs in each song cycle. And this elder told me, he said he's learned some new songs. And he said, our songs aren't over. They're only over when our people die. And our people are not dead. So these songs, these ceremonies will continue to grow as long as we're open to it.
Thank you. Brandie, can culture evolve? When you look back at how we digitize Peone and the kids didn't have to drive long distances at night to practice or wait, for the games every month or wherever they were happening. When we talk about the evolution of culture, when our games produced and digitized Peone, where people could practice and play and learn even from a young age, would you say that that's a great example of cultural evolving? And is it okay for culture to evolve in that way?
Yes, actually, Kilma is a rock star, because our youth actually played his app, can't remember what it was called, but they're little bears that play our traditional game that we usually play at night. And the kids would play it constantly. I even played it too when I found out about the app. And so when they found out that Kim was the one that developed it, I mean, they were taking pictures with him and everything. But with the traditional game of Peone, most back in the day, it was only men that played it. And there's some tribes that still believe only men can play. But I don't know if it's intergenerational trauma or maybe just the men not stepping up, but the women did. And so now, even with our tribe, we have over 5 Peone teams of women, which is actually 20 women that play, and I think there's more. So the women stepped up, and then also teaching our kids. And so now, when you go to tournaments, there's a lot of women teams and a lot of children teams. So, and that tradition is going to continue on.
Wonderful. For those who are unfamiliar, Peone is a game that's been played for centuries, maybe even millennia in the Southwest. It's a traditional tribal hand game where you play around a campfire. It begins at dusk, and the teams battle it out all night till there's a winner, sometimes into the wee morning hours, and there's a jackpot that they play for. And so it's been played for a long time in our region. And I think about how culture has evolved when Robert Levi, who was a bird singer, when he put his on CDs, how, you could take bird songs then with you in the car and things. And I know some people, when we're pushing that boundary as Native American futurists and leaders, when we're carrying that torch for our people and we're moving forward, there are people who want to remain stuck in the past. And, that's my opinion. And I use that word intentionally, but it's not to hurt anybody's feelings. It's just that, when you're pushing the boundaries forward and you're moving forward and you're trying to carry a civilization forward with the culture and things, there are people who are uncomfortable with that. And that's something that we've encountered. I know I've encountered, and I'm sure maybe some of you have as well, especially being on tribal council, leading your people. Sometimes it's very thankless. And I know that because I was on my tribal council as well. Alec, is it okay for culture to change in this way as we move forward?
Sure, Kilma. I think something that you said when you first asked the question is Native American culture static? And, I always oppose the kind of singular kind of framing of Native American cultures because there are hundreds of tribes in the U.S. There are thousands across the world. In the world itself, there are 200 million indigenous people in more than 70 countries. And it's so important to really frame our history correctly, because when you open a textbook, our cultures aren't in textbooks. It's orally passed down from generation to generation. And when I said I'm from the Palma Band of Luiseño Indians, the word Palma translates to the place where there is water. It's both literal, but also figurative in that we carry the water in different ways. Some people carry our language forward. Others are crafters. For my father and I, that's medicine and healing. And everyone's role is important. And I think when you think about how the world is becoming increasingly digital, globalized, it's perfectly okay for Native American cultures to change because nothing is ever static. It responds to the environments that we're in. But it's also important when we kind of think about our youth and students not to shrink who you are in these spaces and to really be your whole self. When I started medical school, I didn't leave my culture at the door. I brought my full self with me, and I'm proud of where I come from in San Diego because I'm a California native in both senses of the word. And I think that's really special because there are so few of us where we have to be the example for youth following behind us.
Let me just hit you with an off-the-cuff kind of question.
Yeah.
Have you found that you're and quickly, because we're, the time, tick, tick, tick.
5 minutes.
Have you found that your indigenous belief system or the things that you learned growing up with your tribe have helped you kind of reframe or have you been able to see medical problems in a different way because of the way that you were raised and because of your culture? I know that's a huge question, but if you can answer that in about 30 seconds.
Sure. I think when we think about like a Western definition of health, it's defined as the absence of disease. But from a more indigenous worldview, and I think across many indigenous cultures, it's much more than the absence of disease. It's this kind of internal and external balance, as well as kind of thinking about the combination of your physical, spiritual, emotional health, but also not just for the individual, but for the community. So I think going through medical school, our perspectives as Indigenous people have always been historically disregarded, especially in medicine, but I think are unquestionably needed. And when you're in those spaces, you can offer your viewpoint and change the way that someone approaches a problem, and that promotes equity not just for Native people, but for all Americans.
Okay, and then we'll work our way here. Activation. If we can show a little more of our footage. Let's see, from our worlds, we'll just queue up some more of the video. We'll see where we're at. So, and we'll work our way back this way. Okay, Alex, so recently I heard you on a podcast, the Pres Development.
Okay.
Can we keep the image up? Okay, there we go. Okay, cool. Recently we heard you on the Present Development
Yes.
podcast. Quickly, in just 1 minute, can you talk about some of the things that you hit on in that podcast and the importance to you and our people about digital sovereignty and that sorts of things, maybe in about 2 minutes?
Sure. I think I can do this in a minute. So the Present Dev podcast, actually run by one of my friends, Saul Kimmich, and they asked me, what does it mean to have an Indigenous digital futurism? What does it mean to have Indigenous data sovereignty? And what data sovereignty means is the right for Indigenous nations to govern the collection, management, and use of data generated by their communities, because we have these legal protections for our communities, on the ground in person, but when you go to the digital space, those frameworks are often absent, and it's more of a guideline rather than a practice. And I think that also speaks, and we talk about this on the podcast, about the need for more Indigenous data scientists to be able to control these systems and embed these principles into the technologies that we're creating, because we don't want something made for us, we want something that we made for us. And it's just a slightly different perspective. And I think when we're in control, it shifts the narrative in a way that, again, is positive rather than negative.
Wonderful. Okay, coming back this way, Brandie, when you see these images on the screen, tell me about your feeling about how we're pushing, technological sovereignty, data sovereignty, these things where, we're taking control of our digital future instead of having people build things for us and then we find our place in it. Instead, we're taking a collaborative approach to build our future and future-proof our culture. How does that make you feel?
I actually was on the app last night looking at all of the pictures and the videos and stuff, and I know one of them, Johnny Bear Contreras from San Pasqual, talked about the ocean and us as a people who once lived down there, and it was cool to be able to watch that. Here we're in Austin, Texas, and I was able to look at the ocean on the app, so that was pretty amazing.
Yeah, so on the screen here you see one of our contributors, Ricardo Cate, who's been doing years and years. He's a daily contributor to the Santa Fe, New Mexico newspaper, and he's an artist, and we're working with him exclusively, and we're building digital galleries with his work. And here on the screen you see Dr. Stan Rodriguez with his Hakwayo Thule boats. You'd know them as kayaks or canoes. There he is standing next to him. So, and then here's where we were working with the Choctaw School of Language to recreate actual transmissions that were used during World War I to help America end the war. So we did a movie. That movie has its world premiere next week at South by Southwest Film. Our work is being recognized across South by Southwest because we're doing something so different and so wonderful for both sides. We're building so many bridges between educational institutions, festivals, conferences, and the Native American communities because we're world building the right way. We're doing things the right way. We're not taking a top-down approach to this. Moving on with the questions and our panelists. Stan, do you want to jump in?
Sure. One of the things that we're talking about with this, an example is the Thule boats. We call Hakwayo. How many of you know how to swim? Okay, about 8 of you. Anyway, how many of you ever been in a Thule boat? How many of you even heard what a Thule boat is? And this is a science that our people use. How long does it take to make a boat? If you had to make a boat right now, how long would it take for you to make a boat?
A long
A
time.
long time. It took us 15 minutes to make a Thule boat that can last up to 2 years. This is part of our science, and it is renewable. It is renewable. You know, prior to encroachment, our people were, you know, in the bay, in the open ocean on Thule boats. When the Spaniards first came, they said they see these crazy people hunting for whales on these boats made out of grass. And this is part of who we are. So being able to do it again, and those two gentlemen that were on the Thule boats are my two youngest sons. So it was really, you know, working with, you know, Catherine and Kilma, you know, getting these things together. Brandie, you showed up there, and you know, we were doing all these things. You know, this is part of transmitting our knowledge for other people to see. And with that app, if you ever come to San Diego, get that app and you just go to the bay, just go to the ocean. You can see these things that, you know, have been going on since, you know, for thousands upon thousands of years. And then I wanted to say one other thing real quick. And Alec, you know, you brought that up about, you know, your father and you know, Kusiai, you know, doctors, you know, about healing. And some people, you know, when we think about, you know, organic medicine and the doctors and how, you know, people today, you know, practice medicine, and it's much more, you know, modern and everything. Back in 2007, and you can relate, I was diagnosed with stage 4 cancer. The doctor only gave me 2 to 3 months to live, and I remember we talked about that. And I went to a medicine man, and that same medicine man worked with Brandie. And they did a ceremony, and in that ceremony, and they gave me medicine to drink, and they said, I'll live to be a very old man. Well, that doctor that told me those things, that even with radiation and chemo, I only have a 25% chance of living 1 year. I seen him about 3 years ago, and he said he doesn't know why I'm still alive. And you know, I attribute much of that to our beliefs, our medicine, our science. And I just wanted to share that with all of you, that we can have both. It's all the same, as long as we respect each other's ways.
Can
Thank you.
I add to that
Yeah,
too?
please.
Yeah, at the same time, we both were very ill. He had the ceremony, and then him and another friend approached me when I was in the hospital, and I only had, you know, I needed a heart transplant, and they said, well, do you want to do the same ceremony? And I said, yeah. And I told Stanley, it's like our candles, the flames were slowly burning out, and that's how we felt. And so we did the ceremony, and I truly believe if that ceremony didn't happen, I would not have gotten my heart transplant. It allowed me to live long enough to be able to receive that gift. And, you know, I had days to live. I was writing my own funeral arrangements at 34. My son was 2. But yeah, definitely. And my doctors encouraged it too. They said, whatever you need to do. So yeah, definitely that.
So it's this idea of merging the oldest civilization in America with the newest technology and the things that we're finding. Some of the most incredible things that are coming about in terms of education for this education conference, as we find these primary source narratives and we work with these primary sources and we work with our culture, we're learning about geosciences, history, language, geography, and in our native way, we believe things come in cycles, full cycles, just like the seasons. You know, some days are good, some days are bad, and you know, we just kind of always go through this cycle of life, just like the seasons. Well, you know, a long time ago, they thought Native Americans didn't know much, and what people are now finding out is that the Native Americans kind of knew a lot. And so again, here we come in this circle. And that's why we're here on stage today at South by Southwest, to impress upon people that we're here, we're in the 21st century, we're relevant, our ways matter, our history matter, our culture matters, and the things that we're doing matter. And so all of you in the room, it's very special that you would take time to come see us today. We've got about 20 minutes left. So what I want to do is just kind of open it up to if there's any burning questions I know that you wanted to talk about. Now, decolonization is a strong word. Is that, it's, I'm a little more on the conservative, moderate side of things. So when I hear decolonization, I kind of sit up and say, what are we talking about here? So if there's anything kind of pressing on your guys' hearts and minds or things that you want to share with the audience, please do. And we'll let that clock run down till about, 10 or 12 to 10 minutes, and then we'll open it up to some questions that'll pop up here on our monitors. Sound good with you guys?
Sounds good.
Okay, all right. Let's whoever's burning to go, let's just
Alrighty. I think two things. The first is something that Kilma and Dr. Stan have alluded to, is this kind of disregard for Indigenous ways of knowing because they're seen as less valid or less important. And I give California as an example where Northern California, for lack of better words, is burning, as a result of climate change. And there are all these articles out last year, especially as the pandemic was 2 years ago, as the pandemic was starting, where California is exploring old ways of cultural fire or revitalizing these practices and kind of returning to the past to address a pressing issue today. And when we think about the problems that we face today, Indigenous people are often gone to for the solutions because these are problems that we have always faced. When we were in charge of our own lands, there weren't rampant fires going throughout the areas that we lived in because there were cultural fire burns, a controlled way, in a healthy way, in a way that puts us in relationship to the natural environment. And I think about, as a doctoral student, policies and programs that have furthered disparities or kind of exacerbated inequities. And for the past century, the U.S. Forest Service outlawed cultural fire and created the conditions in which we're now facing today because they didn't see our ways of existing as valid, our practices as barbaric, especially, you can use that same example for subsistence food systems and whale hunting, where it's seen as cruel to do something, but not realizing that, this relative, this whale is providing for hundreds of community members in a way that is done sustainably. And I think when people start to learn the reasons why we have those practices, it's seen as more, quote, civilized or less barbaric. Second, to the decolonization thing, I see this a lot in academic spaces, and I would say it's often used as a metaphor. It's used when it shouldn't be used, where it's decolonizing medicine, decolonizing education, decolonizing public health, but it's much more than that. It's returning control of land and systems to Indigenous peoples. It's not something that should be used when you're advocating for social justice or improving the way that something is done. It's much more of an intentional action. And I think that just speaks to the importance of language. Be very intentional about the words and phrases you use, because you never know when an Indigenous person is in that space and hears what you're saying and feels uncomfortable being there.
Thank you so much, Alec. Let's work our way back down this way in the panel. Brandie, is there anything that you'd like to cover today as we're winding down the session? Is there anything that you'd like to discuss?
Pretty much, I'd like to say that, we still have our traditions, and, we're very proud and we honor, our youth that actually go off and get educated. And so my family, when I found out that he was selected to be on this committee for Washington, D.C., I told my family we have to give him a gift because he's going to be traveling all around. And so we presented his ribbon shirt that he has on right now. And so it's fun to be able to do that and to honor him because he's honoring our people with what he does.
Absolutely. Dr. Rodriguez.
One of the things that's happened since encroachment has been the marginalization of our people, including our story, our history, all these things. I mean, Alec, you brought up a point about how in fourth grade made missions over there, and it was lauded as something that was great for the people. The Indians loved it. They, became civilized. They forgot to say that on November 5th, 1775, hundreds of Kumeyaay warriors descended upon the mission in San Diego, burned it to the ground, executed the priest and 2 others because of atrocities that were committed against people. Those things are never taught. Other narratives that have gone on. How many of you ever been to school and heard about Columbus, that he discovered America? Who were we? And these other narratives that, these romanticized, myths that have been portrayed. So to decolonize, to raise us from the form of a savage to civilize, that no, we are who we are, and that's all right. It's all right to be a Native person. This is something that's very important when we talk about self-efficacy and our own, how we are as a people. These things are very important for us. I'm going to throw something at all of you. How many of you are Native people? Okay, we have a few people. Look at me, the ones that didn't raise your hand. You are all Native from somewhere. Is that not true? How many of you speak your languages or know your culture? Some of you, yes. Many of you, no. Because what happened to us also happened to you. And to indigenize yourself, to reclaim who you are, is very important for your own self-efficacy. You may not even know it. We know that when we don't speak our language, when we don't practice our culture, we're dying inside. Many people are dying inside because of that, but they don't know that they're dying. And I'll just say that when you start reclaiming it, that's power that goes into you. So thank you for letting me share that.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. We can cue some more animations from our work at Our Worlds. Again, we're going to open it up to questions. Just to remind people, if they are interested in asking us questions, I would remind you to go to your app, go to Sessions, and engage, and you'll be able to ask questions. And I'll start. I see a question that popped up on the screen, and I want to balance this panel out a little bit. The question on the bottom of the screen here: how do you reconcile honoring participation in institutions like elite universities and the military, but also talk about colonization? Look, I'll tell you that yes, I'm a first American, but I'm an American first. And I love the institutions of our country and the way that I've been able to climb out of poverty using them. I volunteered for the military because I wanted to be a pilot, and the military helped me achieve that. I wanted to learn more, and the University of California, Santa Barbara and USC helped me achieve that. The Harvard Executive Program helped me achieve that. So I'm not on stage saying anything bad about institutions in America. In fact, it's our institutions, I think, that help us climb out of these poverty places. And in fact, the reason why I'm on stage here today is a product of those institutions. So that's where I personally stand. Now, what I say may not be how the panelists feel, but it's just something that I think needs to be said. There's some questions on the screen. I don't know how you guys want to take these questions or which ones matter, but
I'll take one of the questions, which is, what are actions we can start taking to more regularly acknowledge, educate, and close the gap between Western and Indigenous culture? And, in the racial reckoning that we've had in the last 2 years, I think many people have rushed to, contact, Indigenous peoples, Indigenous organizations, draft land acknowledgements, and, it's often, it's well-intentioned, but I think often done incorrectly, or it's often performative in nature, and that it's kind of checking a box like, okay, we did this, we can move on. But I think we really have to, move beyond that land acknowledgement and really think about, pushing back and taking more of an active role in partnership with Indigenous peoples, where if you hear something said, why don't you push back on it? Don't stay quiet. If you hear people saying, let's have a powwow, explain why that's bad. If you hear something like, oh, That issue is low on the totem pole. Think about the origins of those phrases, those words. What's the phrase for, if you're doing something that's not in your list of responsibilities, you're called off the reservation. Learn about the history of that term. It originated in the late 1800s in Northern California, where you weren't allowed to leave a reservation without the permission of the police. And if you left the reservation, if you went off the reservation, you were shot. So think about why those terms exist and why language is so colonial, and be more active. That's really, I think, how not just, it's not on us to always do all the work, it's on all of us.
You guys see any questions that you'd like to address?
I'm going in. All right. The one on the bottom, how can community colleges support Native American students? Our biggest challenge has been recruitment and engagement. Well, I'm going to throw in not just community colleges, but also universities. And part of that is with the institution itself. What are your intentions? When we seen we were having difficulty with our story being taught, we created our own tribal college, Kumeyaay Community College. It's the only operational tribal college in California that offers an accredited associate's degree. And this is working in with a MOU with one of the community colleges. Our teachers are Kumeyaay. Our classes are taught through a Kumeyaay lens. And we open it up not just to Kumeyaay, but to anybody who wants to come and learn. With that said, as we go on into the university level, I'm going to pick on Cal State San Marcos, California State University San Marcos. They have an incredible Indigenous studies program. Most of the professors in that program are Native people, Native Americans, who are teaching from the lens of a Native American, our Indigenous studies. Prior to that, many times our courses are taught by non-Indian people. And the student body, the Native American student body, I would say it's one of the largest Native student bodies of any of the universities out there. And the faculty, the staff are supportive of the student, that what we want success stories. We want our students to make it through. We want to help them to get through. We want to make a safe place for them to study, to practice, and to get through this. So these are some of the things that we look at. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rodriguez. Brandie, are there any questions that strike you or that you'd want to answer? I'll go ahead and answer the top one while you figure. So, the top question is, what book are you reading now that you might recommend? My favorite book that I've ever read in my life was the Norton Book of Science Fiction. It was short stories, collection of short stories, and just the mind-opening things, and the way you read the stories and relate them to history of when they're written. But it talks about what you're reading now, and the news that I'm reading these days over the last few years and like day to day, it almost reads like science fiction, some of it. So I'm not really reading any books that I would recommend. I would recommend reading, multiple news sources and kind of finding stories that engage you, that are interesting, because some of the stories that are coming out are just, you kind of, I thought I'd seen it all, but I haven't, so.
Yeah, I'll also answer that one. I'm very interested in behavioral health, and a book that I recently started reading is Mind Spread Out on the Ground by Alicia Elliott, where I believe she's a Mohawk author from up north in Canada. And the Mohawk word for depression translates to mind spread out on the ground. And it's a very important kind of first-person perspective on colonialism, mental health, and just kind of modern Indigenous living, but also acknowledging our kind of collective traumas as Indigenous peoples. And that's a book that I would definitely recommend. And I'll also take the top question quickly. What are state and local policies that you advocate for to promote pathways for young peoples in your communities? Reduced tuition, enhanced considerations and admissions. Educating Native Americans is not really an example of affirmative action. It's honoring the kind of responsibilities that our institutions built on our own lands have to our communities, where we give people an education so that they can go back and serve their people. And I think that's one example. You have to move beyond meeting metrics and understand what the needs and priorities of local communities are. And that's going to look different from community to community, especially when Brandie pointed out that there are hundreds of Indigenous communities in the state of California.
So I'm going to pick a question for Brandie. I see it right there. Any advice on how to increase women's and female representation in tribal leadership?
I just saw that too. I can't see that far away, so I'm squinting. But oh gosh, definitely with women, we've got to encourage each other. We can't tear each other down. When I see our young women that are out there bird dancing and playing Peone and doing our culture, and they're doing good in school, like we have to promote them and let them know that we're there for them. And as a woman who served 18 years, not a prison sentence, but 18 years on tribal council, that's the main thing, is that, definitely you need to have your sisters with you. And, jealousy is a big part of our community, and that needs to stop, and we need to encourage each other, definitely.
I was always so impressed with my tribe and how long ago we broke the glass ceiling for female leadership, and the strong matrilineal society that we have in Paula, where women are traditionally the head of the household, and that having those strong women in my life helped me become a better man. And so this female leadership model that we have in our tribe, has really helped me as a man. So I'll just throw that in there. Dr. Rodriguez?
Real quick, I just wanted to say, looking for any publications, Dr. Jolie Proudfit is right over here. She is the head of American Indian Studies at Cal State San Marcos. Not throwing you under the bus, but on native ground. Take a look at it, buy it, you'll learn a lot. Also, sitting right next to I know I'm going fast, but here, let me finish this real quick. What are your thoughts on the intersection between Indigenous lives and Black and Latinx lives and our collective fight for liberation? That's an interesting question, very good question. For the people who are of African ancestry, you've gone through many hardships. Your people have gone through many hardships. When we talk about intergenerational trauma, that is at an extreme. You're right there with us. They tried to exterminate us, and they tried to bring you in to take our place. Both of those narratives were based on extermination of people and subjugation. The language loss, the cultural loss impacted. I can't even begin to describe what happened. But yes, the pain, being able to, ground yourselves culturally is a big part of that. Also the Latinx, I've heard that before, and I'm just gonna throw the Latinx people under the bus. How many of you people here are Latinx? How many of you are Latinx but you're Native? How many of you are Latinx Native and you speak your native language? Okay, if you're from Spain, that'll work. The others, that is the problem. I'm going to leave that with you. That's going to come from you, how to indigenize yourself and bring that back with your people. That is the main thing when we talk about self-identity. Thank you.
Yeah, and if I could also finish that quickly, I think we often see the term BIPOC, Black, Indigenous, People of Color, used so liberally, and it acknowledges this shared pain and history where it's not controversial to say we are a nation of immigrants built on Indigenous genocide and chattel slavery. And when we use BIPOC, it homogenizes and makes those experiences seem very similar, when we really have to center equity and acknowledge that every group has shared pain, but different needs now. So really push back on using that term and partner with each community.
Thank you, Alec. As we wind down, I just wanted to re-impress upon everyone that the views and expressions spoken here today are individuals. There was no collective agreement. There was no collective agenda. We didn't talk about the panel beforehand. So everything you heard today was native to what happened today as the questions unfolded, as the conversation unfolded. And we all, I think, did a great job representing our individual viewpoints and our tribes respectively. So can we please have a round of applause for our panelists? If we could cue the animation just for our last minute here, we'll cue the activations, and then anybody in the audience just have a quick burning question that they want to ask of us while we're on stage. We could take it now if it's quick. If not, please catch us afterwards, after this panel, and we'd be happy to answer more questions as after the panel. So with that being said, Dr. Rodriguez, would you like to have some closing words for us, please?
Maya na pau, pel nya we na som pi, nya po mo ya nya we ta kanap nya we ta kwar kwar. Mayum nya we wan po nya po nya yu han, kwa han, a han. Puk na just mo ya mayum nya we na wera nyep ter chech. Nya po mesel po kenya I pe nya matn. Nya tike, may khamep sho. What I said, with what we said here, we've come together to share. I ask that this blesses all of us here today. That when we leave here, that we continue on this incredible path called life. Maybe we learn something. Maybe something that we can take with us as we touch other people in our lives. Until then, I wish everyone a safe journey, that the Creator watch over all of you, and that when we come again, that we come to see each other again in a good way. Thank you.
Thank you. A round of applause for our panelists. Check us out, Our Worlds, with an S, ourworlds.io. See what we're up to. Download our beta. Go to our landing page. Look for us at the booth. We'll be downstairs at the booth. Please stop by and see us, and we'll be happy to talk to you about all sorts of cool and engaging things that we're doing, merging the newest technologies with the oldest civilization in America at ourworlds.io. Thank you.